My Gavanan Melanin, and well met indeed. I am Arche Galadirthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome to another faction overview, this time focusing on the Easterlings of Rune. They have been substantially changed since version 1.2, and this overview shall hopefully give you a little glimpse into the life of a runic clansman in version 2.1, which you should hopefully be playing for the majority of the time this video is live. So, let's crack on as we always do. The size of your domain in your starting army then. Well, I'm afraid to say that you're seeing it already completely on the screen. That's quite an achievement, isn't it? You can see your entire domain by simply zooming out if you play as Rune. We have changed them to being a single clan whose goal it is to unite the other clans of Rune. And as such, you begin with only Mistrand. This is your starting domain. Your armies, as you can see, there's a reasonably sizable one here, but you have only got clansmen and low level. But you're supported by an almost identical army. In fact, I think it almost is identical in the fort just south. So your faction leader, Lokhan Rukar, is in there, and your faction heir, which is Khan Margos, is in the fort to the south. That is the entirety of your starting domain and the size of your army. So, leader, capital, unique bodyguards, very straightforward. Your leader is, of course, Lokhan Rukar. Lokhan Rukar has a nice, unique battle model. There he is. Although that is just what any faction leader of your nation will look like. His bodyguard are the Lok Scion Rim, who happen to be a new unit for version 2, and they're just an incredibly elite spear unit for Rune, one of Rune's bests, which is very, very cool. So there is Lokhan Rukar. Your faction heir is Khan Margos, who, as I say, resides in the fort. That is a standard Easterling general. Let's move him around so he's not hiding. That's what the Easterling generals now look like. Khan Margos has archers, the Lok Narim. They are his bodyguard. So you get one solid spear unit and one excellent archer unit. And unfortunately, that's it. In terms of your bodyguard, your diplomat, of course, they train out of your capital city. There's your diplomat, although in actual fact, they train out of the Tent of the Khan. Which is in the capital city, guarding the gates or whatever I wrote on the description there. So that's where you get your bodyguards. Those are your bodyguards, and that's where you get your diplomats from. I'll show you your units, of course, actual bodyguard, the default bodyguard, in the second half of the episode. So we come on then to Rebel Expansion. Well, of course, as you can see from the map at turn 2, you can go anywhere. North, east, south, west, all options are available to you. Lest is a particularly nice, sizable target. El Gair is also a nice location to go. Or you can head south and try and take Mataram before maybe Khand or Mordor get down there. Same with Enmahath. You got Burham and Arrakis further west, and all the way further west, guarded quite heavily with a large garrison, is the Castle of Varfest. Showing off as well, as you can see here with these overviews. I'm not going to show you each individual progression of your CSMs, your campaign strategy models, because many of you will have seen them. And also, the aim of this is to give you an overview of the nation, not to give you a real 2-hour-long breakdown. But rest assured, you have your own unique CSMs now if you play as Rune. Many of them are on show here. They have decidedly runic settlements within them, and then redder walls, as you can see with Mistrand. So whenever you start painting the map orange, your towns will update to your culture too. And Varfest as a castle also has those same designs. Remember that the tiers now are Keep, Castle, Stronghold. So a castle is the second tier of available upgrades for the castle line. So that's your Rebel Expansion. So then let's talk about your neighbours and your diplomacy. Well, obviously you border Dorwinion, but you don't start at war with Dorwinion. You only start at war with the Dwarves of Erebor, who are right up there on your border in Skarn, pressing on with an expeditionary force. You are allied to Mordor and Khand, but you are not allied to Harad or the Arad Anayim, far to the south, in Vinya Forostar, Vinya Mitalmar, and the Havenlands of Umbar. So, your allies are to your south and your enemies are to your north. Dorwinion, very likely to attack you because, although they're not really actually, they are far more likely to try and solidify their hold over the rebel regions around this area in the lands of Ravanion, and they're not that likely to attack you. So you'll get a bit of breathing space in a time in which to build up and go to try and secure the towns, as we will discuss in depth in a moment. Economy and buildings then. Well, Rune don't have any restrictions, which is very nice. So you can build everything. If we go to a building browser, You will need, of course, the Masons Guild houses to get the highest tiers, which is the same for everyone. And if we find it in the Master Builders, there's a Masons Hall, a Master Masons Hall, and a Masons Guild house. They reduce the cost of buildings, and they are required for some of the highest tier buildings. Excuse me, sorry. So in terms of economy, you're not going to be restricted by any buildings. You'll be able to get the full of everything. Marketplaces, and ports, for example. Although you won't actually. Ports, you can only get to the second tier of ports. You can't go further than that. You're not a seafaring nation. You are a river and lake-faring nation. Although, granted, the Sea of Rune is sizable, it's still not the open ocean. And so that's reflected in your lack of ability to go beyond Tier 2 ports. But rest assured, you do get your own unique CSMs for ports as well. No longer are they just basic Medieval 2 CSMs, they are now fantasy-inspired. The whole map has been changed to fit better with Lord of the Rings. So what kind of guilds can you expect then? Well, of course, you get the Merchants Guild playing as Rune, Merchants Guild there, and then it upgrades to the Master Merchants Guild. That just gives you a boost to tradable resources. And you get the Warriors Guild, which everyone gets. And for you, it's called the Dragon Wraths Guild, and then the Master Dragon Wraths Guild, taking on a decidedly more solid form when it upgrades. And that, as you can see from it gives you a melee weapon bonus at tier 1, and then the second one, which you can only get in one location, will give you a melee bonus to troops trained in that place, and an experience bonus to your whole faction. You don't get the third tier of guilds, you're not good enough, basically. You don't have good enough heritage. In a world where there are descendants of Numenor and elves knocking around, not everyone is deemed worthy. You also get trade routes. These are similar to what they were before, where they were the caravans, and then I think trade routes was the second name. But they've been slightly nerfed. They don't give a huge financial boost anymore. They just give an increase in tradable goods, although I believe the third tier is very worthwhile. But as you can see, they have substantial requirements. So you need a grain exchange and roads before you can build the first one. Then you need to upgrade to a market to get the second one. And then you need the next tier of the market and paved roads before you can get the third tier of the trade routes building. You also see down here you get the Candish outposts. This is because you are currently allied to Cand, which means in your capital city you can build the Variag mustering ground, which gives you nomad horsemen, which plugs a somewhat weakness of the early game for Rune in that you don't have... Rune have very, very good late-game cavalry, but their mid-game cavalry is a bit lacking, and so the Variags can plug that hole for you if you so choose. If you attack Cand, you can no longer build this building. So do remember that. But it is also only available in your capital city. And this building here is your armory, which I will explain in every episode because I've seen a lot of people question it now. If you want to get a garrison in a town, you have to build this building. And it says it at the bottom there, provides a garrison when assaulted, which doesn't actually make pure grammatical sense, but it does enough. And as you can see here, it gives you a boost to law of 10%, and it is a negative income effect of 100. We can't change how that is displayed. That's just how the game shows it. So what it does is it adds minus 100 to the income of this town. Basically, it costs 100 gold coins to have the armory, and it costs 100 gold coins every turn. There is a second tier of the armory which will give you upgraded garrison troops. It will often give you maybe one or two more as well. So you'll go, or I think it doesn't. I think it only gives you one more. So you go from 2 troops to 3 troops, but the 3 troops of the tier 2 one will be upgraded. They'll have a visual look which reflects that, and they'll often have a melee weapon bonus and an armor bonus, and often an experience bonus as well. So the second tier is really, really useful, but it costs an awful lot of money. Finally then, the last thing we're talking about buildings, the blacksmiths. Rune get to tier 4. So you get the leather tanner, the leather worker, the blacksmith, and the armourer. And there they all are out on display for you. Highest being heavy lamella. So you can get 4 tiers of your blacksmith. And I believe that is it. Oh, the town health building is new. I won't mention this in everyone, but every nation now has the ability to get a health bonus. And this is because Public Order has been edited quite substantially in version 2. It's still not something you're really going to have to worry about. But do note that Public Order now is something you have to actually pay at least some attention to. And in an attempt to help you deal with Public Order in new conquests, because it's primarily religious problems you're going to have, although it's called culture in game, obviously, but it is religion. And a way to now circumvent that is to go for the public baths. But you'll note that it requires a Warlord's Hall before you can even build it, and the second tier requires a Great Hall, and those are your Town Halls, which are just there listed in black. Meeting Hall, Warlords, Great Hall, and High Palace. The final thing to mention about Rune in version 2.1 before we get onto their scripts is that they do now have their own culture. Of course, invasions have been taken out of version 2, as I hope most people know, and so no longer do Harad, Khand or Rune share the culture of Mordor. They now have their own culture. And this is primarily to make it so that you can't backstab Mordor as easily, which is a very common way of playing as these three evil nations. You'll also note when we get to it, well, no, I'll talk about... I'm just talking about Rune here. We'll worry about the others later, but I'm just telling you they're fellow brothers. So if you take over lands in Khand or you take over lands in Harad, you will share their culture, but nowhere else in the world has your culture. So it's a little harder to expand, which is a nice little side effect. And there's the cool little icon for Men of the East, which is the name of the culture. So that is the building and economy side of Rune. So then we come on to the scripts. Well, Rune is now affected only in version 2 by one script, and that is uniting the clans. It's the whole reason why you start with this single province. And essentially, the way that it works for Rune is that certain locations will unlock certain units. So if we look here, for example, you've already got your town guard built, and at the moment, all you can train is Daratai warriors. You get Daratai warriors, you can also get Daratai hunters, Daratai clansmen. They come out of your town hall because they're your militia. I should have mentioned, militia now come out of the town hall in version 2. They no longer come out of the land clearance. And in addition, the meeting hall is where you are able to train troops. Recruitment slots allowed 2. If you are playing the game, you've queued up a unit, and for example, I don't think I can show you because I'm not sure I can delete the building. Oh, I can. You'll note that it is grayed out. Now, what that means is that you've got the ability to line that unit up because you've got the town guard, but you don't have a building which allows recruitment. So you just need to build the meeting hall. Town halls have the recruitment buildings in. So that's why you can train that. But, so those are your units. The Daratai, clansmen, hunters, and warriors. If you are to build the practice range, you get the Daratai crossbowmen as well. But that's it. In order to get more units, as you'll note, you have a stables, but it doesn't even give you any units. Various units of Rune are unlocked by taking various locations. So, if you head north and you take Elgar and Rubar, you will unlock the Aryalad units. Or Aryalad, call them whatever you like to call them, it's a made-up name. Aryalad units. They give you the very cool runic unit, which has a double-bladed sort of war pole, and your first proper dedicated cavalry unit, and they come from Elgar and Rubar. Now do note that once you've unlocked them, you can't lose the ability to train them, so if you take these 2 regions and then lose these 2 regions, you don't lose the Aryalad units. They stay with you. Additionally, once you've taken these regions, the units are available everywhere. They aren't restricted to just these 2 provinces. They are available in all provinces. You just need these 2 to subdue the clan and get them on board. So the Aryalad units are there and there. We'll see more. The units, of course, are in the second half of the video. If you head south to Mataram and Enmahath, you can take over control of some Khandish units. The cavalry archers and the dismounted foot archers, which are better than your militia archers, of course. If you head to the west and you take Burram and Arrakis, Khand are in Mataram, so take Mataram and you'll get the Khandish units. If you take Burram and Arrakis and Enmahath, you unlock the Balchoth units. Now the Balchoth come in 2 forms in version 2 because there's a new Balchoth unit that you can all train, and again I'll show you on the next time. So by taking the kind of 5 provinces around you that cover the south and east, by taking those 5 provinces, you'll unlock quite a few units. If you take Lest, you will unlock the ability to build boats. At game start, Rune cannot build boats. It is not available to you, noted by the fact you already have a port with nothing in it. In order to train any ships of any kind, you will need to take Lest, where the clan that... and then you absorb the clan, the ship-faring clan, if you will, or the sea-faring clan. And that will unlock boats. And then there is one final clan that you can side with, and they are from the Far East, and they are the Suri Ut. And I'll show you their unit in the second half, and it's very cool. But in order to get the Suryut on board, you need to take all of the provinces I just mentioned, Ruba, Elgair, Mataram, Enmahath, Bura Monarchis, and Lest. But you also need Strondost, Karasant, and Sant Anhui. You will need all of those provinces in order to get the Suryut on board. So to get your very finest cavalry unit, you will have to attack Dorwinion. No way around that, I'm afraid. But they're only going to side with you if they know that you're powerful and you have ambition, and that is how you show them you've got it. By taking those provinces. So, if you, for example, just go straight for Dorwinion out of Mistrand and you don't bother with the rebel provinces around you, you will have only your militia units for the early start of the game. Now, don't get me wrong, Daratai warriors are pretty good, as we'll see in a moment, but they're still not the greatest, and Dorwinion, of course, have no restrictions, so they're going to be rebuttaling your attacks quite easily. Other than that, I've mentioned it already, but do just remember that in order to get a garrison in a town, you will need to build the garrison quarters, which is called the armory, and this requires the first tier of the town hall, in cities only. The second tier of it requires the Great Hall, which is also a town hall. The Great Hall is the third tier there. In castles, however, and unfortunately we don't have any to show you, but in castles, or I can just show you the castle building browser. In castles, this is available immediately. So in a castle, you can get a garrison as soon as you've captured it, but in a town, you can only get it once you've built a town hall, and then you can get your garrison. So that's how you get your garrison troops. Other than that, there aren't any scripts for Rune. I've already mentioned that you can get the Khandish units from your capital, and you can unite the clans around you to form to be one powerful nation. Oh, the Khandish units, if you do go to war with Khand, instead of getting the Khandish units in your capital, you can build an enslavement camp of Khand in the Khandish heartlands, which will allow you to train Khandish troops from these regions instead. So you can either ally with Khand and get their units out of your capital, or you can suppress them, subdue them, and train their units from their heartland. And they give you a couple of units to supplement holes in your roster, but nothing major, and they're not very readily available either. It's more of just one of those nice little additions to jazz up the gameplay. It's not going to break any rules or anything. Or not rules, but... Also, do just note that the rebel garrisons in unclaimed towns around the world have been not substantially buffed, but they've been buffed. Certain towns like Varfest have been substantially buffed for purposes that I don't need to go into, but a lot of towns have large garrisons, like Lest, for example. And certainly playing as the Easterlings, if you combine your army as one and go straight for Lest, you might have some difficulty. Do also note that any rebel general who is outside of a town at game start is now free to move around and do what he wants. I can assure you that were you to attack Lest almost out of the gate, then this gentleman over here, Yardig, he will almost certainly come over and assist Lest and attack your army. So do make note of that. Rebels are more of a threat now. They're not so much that they're going to really bog you down and bore you, but you actually have to think about them now. No longer can you just paint the map with nary a thought. You have to actually win some early battles to do it. So, major map changes from version 1.2 for Rune. Well, of course, the Isle of Nabur is back. I don't actually know. Was it in the game in 1.2? 1.2 was so long ago. In the course of time between 1.2 and now, Naburka has existed, and then we took it away again, and then we brought it back again. But rest assured that it is now fully there in version 2.1. So there is the Isle of Nabur, which is a new conquest for you. And of course, the lands of Ravanion are substantially changed, as I covered in the Erebor video. There's now a lot more geography going on here, and there's more choke points, there's more rivers, the regions have new names, and the regions have been slightly adjusted. The biggest one being Gazar Barak in the middle there, which used to be all the way up here, which used to be this section here, has now been cut out and plonked in the middle. Other than that, though, there's not too much different. Mordor hasn't changed. Khand hasn't changed. Western Ravanion is as well slightly different. As I mentioned in the Erebor video, there's now a lake in the centre. And, we got some burnt lands indeed over there. And, of course, the large region of Carverad has been carved up, if you pardon the pun. And Vilter now exists, and so does Logarth. This all used to be one province, and this used to be one large province. And they've just been broken down into smaller provinces. But those are the only real map changes. Oh, actually, quite a substantial map change. You might not think it, but it is that this river here used to not extend all the way up to the mountains, but it does now. And that bridge in the south side there, as you can see, is the only way to cross it. So it means that the AI Dorwinion, or indeed yourself if you're being on the back foot, it's a lot easier to now defend this mountain path between the Heartlands of Dorwinion and the Heartlands of Rune, because that bridge is now the only way across. So that is quite a key point, actually. Do make note of that. So tips and difficulty then. Well, Rune is unfortunately always going to be an easier campaign because of the location that you are and the lack of enemies you have. But our attempts to make it harder, I think, have worked, and the start of the game is a lot more interesting now. The conquest of the rebel regions actually takes some time, and you've got to jumble that with the fact that Erebor might attack you at any moment, and Dorwinion might attack you at any moment. And those nations don't have to worry about only starting with one province. So it's not for the faint of heart anymore, but the experienced players amongst you won't have any trouble. But those of you who maybe are a little new to Medieval 2, or just perhaps not very good, like myself, then you might struggle indeed with Rune. I doubt you'll ever lose, but I think you might take a long time to win. And for some and for many, that is part of the fun, indeed. Because once Dorwinion, obviously, it will be your main threat, and then you've got the dwarves to contend with. And if you're lucky, Dale might also have come down the river running, taken Condovin, and headed to Interior Nior, so you might have 3 people to fight. And why not make a real show of it and turn on Mordor when you're at your absolute strongest and just rock up to Barad-dûr, knock on the door and say, "Hey, Sauron, you're out, mate." The choice is, of course, yours. But now we'll pop over to the battle map and we can talk through, you can see all of those units I've just been blabbering on about. So welcome to the battle map side. Now, briefly, very briefly, I leave it on this screen with the large start battle image in the middle there, because then the units actually at least all kind of move around and they also speak to me. If I actually play the game and then pause, so that there's less of an obstructive barrier in the middle, then unfortunately it's deadly silent, no music or sound plays, and they all stand still. But anyway, so it'll be like this for every video. So this is Rune. As you can see, they are a very varied nation. They have options in the archers, options in the cavalry, and plenty of ground forces. This is why their campaign is one of the easiest, really. They don't have any major weakness. So it's unfortunately rather a doddle. One thing they do actually lack as a nation is armor piercing. They don't have very much armor piercing at all. I think they actually only have 1 unit, as we'll find out as we go through. So it can be very difficult to bring down enemies who might be relatively well armored, and you happen to start right next to and at war with one of those. So it can be a bit of a challenge bringing down the dwarves, but because whilst you do have a very varied roster, you don't excel at anything really, as we'll see as we go through. So, the first unit that you're going to get, as I mentioned, are the Daratai units. Now, these are the Daratai, those 2 there, the crossbowmen there, and the warriors there. There are 4 of them altogether, 2 mainstream and 2 archers. And the Daratai are your militia tier. So, there's Daratai clansmen here, as you can see. 4 attack, 6 defense, nothing too bad. But they've got poor morale response. They are better than orcs, worse than elves and dwarves, and not the best human units. So they are decidedly average. They are, however, supplemented by the Balchoth if you take the towns of Bur-Ermin Arrakis and En-Mahath. Then you get these 2 units that join your ranks, the Balchoth Tribesmen and the Balchoth Spearmen. Now, the Balchoth are useful, is the best word for them, because they are your only javelin unit. And javelins are how you kill dwarves, let me tell you. Their melee attack is awful, but their missile is enough to make it worthwhile. But their total defense is only 5. Now, they're a mercenary unit, unfortunately, so I can't show you how much they cost. Whereas I can show you the clansmen are also, unfortunately, a mercenary unit. So again, can't show you how much they cost. Well, that didn't go to plan, did it? So those are the Balchoth. They get a bonus against cavalry with their javelins, though, so they're excellent at bringing down cavalry, which will help against... Dorwinion actually has a surprising amount of cavalry, so it will help against them. And of course, if you take Kandon, you'll definitely get a bonus. The Balchoth are a little aggressive, and this is reflected by the fact that their morale response is impetuous, which means they deal with morale shocks much better than the Daratai do, but they might attack without orders. Now, they are supplemented by this, as I say, new unit, the Balchoth Spearmen. They are just a early game spear unit for Rune because it's one of the biggest, earliest weaknesses Rune had, and we needed to counter it a little. So you get the Balchoth Spearmen. They also look really cool. I think they look excellent. Really good work by Hummingbird. And the Balchoth have a 3 attack, 3 charge, but a 13 defense. So whilst I've put them in this militia tier, they are actually more sort of akin to the warriors with the 10 defense, but their attack is very, very low. Now, an attack of that being that low for a pike unit or a halberd unit is understandable, but for a spear unit, that really lets them down, which is why I've put them in this first tier, because they'll defend very, very well, but they're not going to kill anything, or they're not going to do very well at killing things. So do be cautious. They're more defensive than aggressive. They can Schiltrum rather than spear wall, which also is an indication of a militia spear unit, because they don't have the training to do spear wall. It requires rigid discipline. But a Schiltrum is just everybody stand in a circle and try not to die. Where they're skilled against mounts because obviously they have spears. Average morale response though, but again, impetuous morale, indicative of the Balchoth. At the militia tier though, you're also supplemented by the Daratai Hunters. They are just your first archers. Missile attack of 2, melee attack of 2, a charge of 2, and a defense of 2. They are the 2s, all around 2s. Now, a feature of Rune, which is also unique to version 2, or something totally unique to version 2, fire arrows no longer exist in version 2. I'll make a separate video that details things like this. But fire arrows do not exist anymore, unless you play as Rune. Rune are unique, and they get fire arrows. So, what this means for each individual unit is as follows. The Daratai Archer's fire arrow is purely aesthetic. It is a fire arrow, but it doesn't have the strength or attack skill of a fire arrow. It's not going to set anyone on fire. It doesn't boost their archer damage. It's purely visual for the Daratai. So do note that. But as we go through the archers, well, there's only 2 other archers. But as we go through them, I'll explain more. So they have a aesthetical fire arrow, but it's just a normal arrow. And do note that the fire arrows of Rune are not the same as the base game fire arrows. They do not fire slower, and they are not less accurate. They are, in fact, incredibly deadly, and it lends a surprising skill to the archers of Rune that you might not have expected to be there. And it gives them a lovely little boost as well. We've made an easy faction even easier. We didn't really. Don't quote me on that, and do not give me a list of why it's stupid. It's purely for fun, and it makes no odds. Right, so at this second tier, you're still before the barracks event. The barracks event is this large gap down the middle. But this second tier, you do actually get a second tier. These are your main line. So we'll start again with the Daratai. There they are, your warriors. They get, obviously, more armor than the lower tier units, or rather, they get armor. So they are at least considered worthy of trying to save. They have a 7 attack, which is quite nice, and a total defense of 10. They don't have very many stats going on, but their stamina's not too bad. Average morale response. Again, indicative of humans being average. Being the nation of Rune, you get a bonus in forests and grasslands, and you get a negative in snow, and you don't get either in deserts. So you are not bothered by deserts, but equally you don't fight better in them. But you don't fight well in the winter, and you fight better on forest and grassland, which is everything other than a desert. So you get many bonuses, but when the winter comes around, you are going to struggle against the dwarves because they get bonuses in the snow. The other unit, this main tier, are the Arialad that I spoke of earlier. Now, I'm very well aware that I pronounced that name completely wrong, but for some reason, that is exactly how my brain said it when I first saw it. It could be Arulad, Aryalad, but I always say Arialad, which is totally wrong. But there we are. That's how I've gone to say it now. Now, these units are awesome, and they are one of your few units that are effective against armor, so use them wisely. They are your early game generals killers. Or general killers. Commander killers is a better word. They kill enemy leaders very nicely because they're armor piercing. Their total defense is 12, which isn't bad. Their attack is 5 and their charge is 6. They're very aggressive for this earlier tier. But again, only average morale and only a good morale response. Unfortunately, if you fight a battle without a general, your army will likely run away if the enemy units do even remotely well. You get a bonus against mounts, though, with the Arialad Dragon Guard. They are very, very cool. Now, this is also where your first cavalry units come in, but only once you've taken certain places. So we'll stick with the Arialad for first, because the Arialad Dragon Riders and the Dragon Guard both only come once you've taken the regions of Elgar and Rubar. And once you've taken those 2 locations, you get these 2 units. The Dragon Guard are very, very good for the tier that they come at. They're much better than Militia Cavalry, but they're not going to do anything against post-game Cavalry. And certainly in the later stages of the game, Dorwinian's Elite Cavalry will really knock Arielad out, and Kandish Cavalry will absolutely run amok around you. Most Kandish Cavalry gets a bonus against other cavalry, and they will eat the Dragon Riders for breakfast. Now, they get a bonus that they are actually better in deserts. So they get a bonus in deserts and grassland, but being cavalry, they're negative effect in forests. And like all runic troops, they get a negative in snow. Again, their morale is only average, their morale response is only average. They're not amazing units, but at the early game, if you go for the Arielad first, they will help your conquest no end, I assure you. And now, one of the two Kandish units that you get mainstream, like available... well, they're only actually trainable in Rune once you have captured them. Oh, no, they're available everywhere. We changed it. Of course, that's why. This is what's different between version 1.2 and now. So you get Kandish Raiders. They are cavalry archers. They are one of only two cavalry archers you get, but the second one's not really a cavalry archer. But these ones are dedicated cavalry archers. You need to take Mataram to get these. They're skilled against mounts. They can form a shooting circle, which is nice, Cantabrian circle. And they're just reasonably good cavalry. They're skilled against mounts because they are Kandish. They bring their Kandish heritage to bear and give you a little bit of a boost. They're not amazing, again, like the Arielad Dragon Riders. They're not going to win any awards, but in the early game, they're really going to help your armies with their mobility and their ability to pepper the enemy at a safe distance and then just run away when things get a bit sketchy. Now, they also come with a dismounted counterpart, which will act as your pretty much your main archer unit throughout the whole game. Now, the Kandish Hunters, though, do not get the runic fire arrows. That's how you'll note when these people fire, in that they're the only ones that don't fire arrows, although the crossbowmen don't as well. Again, they are only average, but their defense is a bit better and their melee is a bit better. They're about actually on par with the Daratai warriors when fighting in melee, so they can hold their own. They're not afraid to go toe-to-toe with the enemies with either their bow or their swords. They are supported as well by one, so you only get 3 units that are effective against armor, and one of them is ranged, of course. The Daratai crossbows with their very cool dragon-headed crossbows. They look really good. They're effective against armor, as I mentioned. These people are awful, though, once they have stopped firing. They are easily one of your worst units if they can't shoot the enemy. They're very poor at defense of only 6 with a 3 attack. They're worse than your militia units, as you can see there. And other than the Daratai Hunters, they are easily your worst unit when they can't fire. So you really want to try and use them to full effect. They are really deadly with their range. A missile attack of 7 that is effective against armor is very, very good. But if the enemy gets to them, you will suffer losses and you will regret it. So do be careful. So then we come to the barracks event, where you can see a deciding gold is the theme after the barracks event. Rune takes on their very iconic look. And speaking of iconic, let's start with the Lok Gamprim. These are your halberd units. Very, very good units. Now, because they are halberds and because they can form their typical spear wall, they obviously have the low attack to counter the outrageously useful animation that they have. But their armor is only actually 15. They are post-barracks event units, but they're not elite units. The elite units come later. But the Lok Gamprim can at least hold their own, and they will form the backbone of your army. But do note that even at this tier, they're still only good morale and good morale response. It's still not amazing. They are supplemented by the Lok Flagrim, the third and last unit that is effective against armor. These people are very, very aggressive. 20 total defense, but their attack is only 6. Do also note their very high armor stat, which means, of course, they'll be very susceptible to enemy armor piercing. And Erebor has quite a lot of armor piercing. So even though these will be your chief unit against Erebor, they will also be Erebor's fodder, unfortunately, because their defense is made up almost solely of armor, which is a little unfortunate. Again, their morale is only good and their morale response is only good. So even at this tier, you're still not going to have units that fight to the death. They will run away. But then supporting this tier this unit is kind of a half and half. It's sort of in the middle, really. Its stats aren't good enough to make it an uber elite, which is what these tier are. Although these tiers just elite, sorry. So you've got militia, mainline, post-barracks event mainline, elites, and then If there are any Uber elites, they go there, but Rune don't get any. And then there's obviously a general. So these people are kind of halfway between elite and mainline, and it's because their defense is only 14, which isn't that great. Their melee attack is 5, so they're on, in terms of defense, they're actually on a sort of similar par to Daratai warriors. 7 attack and 10 defense plays 14 defense and 5 attack. But their missile attack is where they win. They are rangers. They're the only ranger unit that doesn't have ranger in the name. But they have the range, accuracy, and missiles of a ranger. Although their range is actually slightly cut down, but their missiles aren't. So their accuracy is that of a ranger, their missiles are, and their range is slightly lower. So they are quasi-rangers. But as the little stat says here, they have flaming arrows that burn the enemy. And you will note that when they actually fire, they are really very good. By turning off the slow firing effect of fire arrows, you note that fire arrows are amazing. And these people will slaughter the enemy. But they are expensive, 832 a pop. And if the enemy gets close to them, they just die. They don't have anything in melee to really show for the fact that their archery is so good. But they are very dependable archers. They're a really good, solid archer unit, but they're just a little crap in melee, unfortunately. So then we come to your elites. Well, there are 2. Obviously, I mentioned the Loke, Scion Rim, and Nu, so we shall start with them. And they're just elite spearmen. There's no other bells and whistles. They are just elite spearmen. They're also the unit for Rune that can use stakes. So they're the only unit you can get that can place stakes. Their defense is 28, which is very good for a human unit, and an attack of 8, which is very nice for a spear unit. But again, their morale is only very good. It's not even excellent, or even there's a tier above excellent that I can't remember. And it's not locked either. And the morale response is only good, which is worse than the aggressive, bloodthirsty Balkov. So they're dependable and they're strong. And in the early game, Lokhan Rukar, with his unit of them, will eat everything around them very easily. Chop them up like they're made of butter. But in the late game, you will be outclassed by certainly the dwarves. And if the Dorwinian sides with the Avari, then the Avari will give you a right run for your money. But you are supported by the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. Now, this unit is very good. Their attack is 13. That's insane for a melee troop. Their total defense is slightly lower to compensate. And do note that their very, very high armor stat makes them very susceptible to armor piercing as well. But they are one of the few units you get that frighten nearby enemy infantry. And they have excellent stamina as well. But still not cracking morale and not amazing morale response. But they also get a bonus against any elephant unit. So whilst it says Oliphants, it means Oliphants, Sauron, the Balrog, and Chariots. Oh, and Ents as well. So any of those are actually what it means when it says Oliphants. Of course, and Mumakil. I didn't even mention them. Mumakil, Great Beasts, Sauron, Balrog, Ents, and Chariots are all Oliphants in inverted commas. So they are just very aggressive and nice. So the Scion Rim will hold the line and the Guildsmen will burst around the edges and murder everyone and everything in their path. For sight nor sound shall escape them. And then we come to what Rune does absolutely best and is right up there with the other nations that have the best. Rune, Dol Amroth, and Northern Dunedain of all nations those 3 have the best single individual instance of an amazing cavalry unit. So the Loke Inas Rim are in a little good gang with the Knights of the Silver Swan and the Royal Guard of Arthedain Royal Guard. Those 3 are the best cavalry, but the Loke Inas Rim, most people, if you are fond of the evil nations, then these are the evil nations version of the Swan Knights, and so they're quite popular. And they're amazing, basically. Their charge bonus is 13, which is very solid. Their attack is 9. Total defense of 24. They inspire troops nearby you. They get a bonus in deserts. They can form a wedge. They have excellent stamina. Their morale's not that great. Their morale response is not that great. But the one thing that they have that makes them superior to almost all other cavalry is their incredibly high mass stat. Now, this is a hidden value that you, unfortunately, don't get to see. And this is the reason why the Swan Knights and the Arthedain Guard are the best cavalry, because the horse that they use has a very high mass stat. Now, this means that it runs slightly slower than everyone else, but once it hits the enemy line, it absolutely pulverizes them. And a unit of Loke Inas Rim can take down a full 200 complement battalion of militia troops, arguably in one charge. They are incredibly powerful. But they're very expensive for it, 1,400, and I dread to think what their upkeep is. And they only come very late in the game, and they train quite slowly unless there's gold present in that region. So if there's a gold resource, they train much quicker than anywhere else. And the nearest gold resource, for your information, is in the region of Strondost, the southern region of Dorwinion. There's gold there. And that's the fastest place you can train them. But they're just beasts, and everyone knows about them, and they're amazing. But then we come to the Suriut. Now, the Suriut, as I say, are only available once you've united all of the clans, including the lands of Dorwinion. But trust me when I say they're worth it. They're actually not that great as a chariot unit, and as anybody with any kind of experience of chariots knows, chariots are useless in Medieval 2, if I term to be blunt about it. And what's good about these people is the archers on their back. Now, they inspire nearby troops, they get a special attack, as I mentioned, they burn targets, but they do one more than that, and their archers go through multiple enemies. They frighten nearby enemies, they can't hide, unfortunately. But their total defense is 20, and again, very high armor stat. Now remember, they are actually counted as oliphants, or elephants. They are just an elephant unit. So any spearmen, and especially pikemen, will bring them down like they're nothing. And javelins will have a very easy time killing them because they have a very large hitbox. You don't want to get them bogged down in melee because they will get killed. But their melee attack is very high, so if you can charge through the enemy line, that will do you some good. But don't get stuck. Missile attack of 8, as I say, huge charge bonus, and the special fire arrow and then some that they get makes them very, very powerful. But they take a long time to come, and they cost 1,500, so you're not going to have armies of them. And finally then, we come to your bodyguard. The Lokrim bodyguard, of course, in version 2 are no longer mounted, and you will have to download a sub-mod if you want to make them mounted again. They are now a halberd unit, giving you some much-needed early defense against any cavalry that you come across, and just holding the line in general. They're effective against armor, though, so sorry, I've lied to you. There are 4 units that are effective against armor, and one of them is your general, which is very useful. It makes them an incredibly powerful unit. They are still much better than Dorwinian's bodyguard, which is something we've tried to stick with. In version 1.2, the runic bodyguard would always be better than the Dorwinian one, and the runic one would beat the Dorwinian one without even a challenge. And it's still the same way now. The Lokrim bodyguard are better than Dorwinian's bodyguard, so don't worry about that. Very high attack stat for a halberd unit, very high indeed. You'll have real ease killing the enemy. 26 total defense is incredible, excellent stamina, you're frightening anyone that's around you, and you get a bonus against armor and mounts. But your upkeep cost is relatively high for a bodyguard unit, and you'll only see that in the campaign. And finally, just because there was space I wanted to show you, this is what the catapult and ballistae crews look like for Rune. Very Mongolian themed. So that is that. Let's line everybody up, and then we can play the fun game of guess who next week's episode is going to be about. I'm going to take the chariots, and I'm going to control them, though, because they are worthy of sight. Oh, no, I know what I used to do that I've not been doing. Turn them all into one group and give them to the AI and let them fight it out. Let them duke it out. And we'll take the chariots. So, get rid of that. Start the battle. So, who do you think is next week's? If you've not played this game before, if you've not watched the previous ones, all I'm going to do is circle around the enemy once, and all you've got to go on are the sprites. And from the sprites, I want you to have a guess. Of course, in a minute, I'm going to show you exactly who we're going up against and who next week's episode is going to be about. But play along, have a little bit of fun, take a guess, see if you were right. Who do you think that might be? The AI has built this army. Of course, I didn't manually select it. I just used the autofill option, which is why there's always bloody siege equipment. Bit of a banner over there giving some indication. Ah, the arrows of the Suriut are firing off. But I'll zoom in over here to show you. It is, of course, Ennard Wythe, the clansman of... who hopefully will get mullered by my army because they're pathetic little weak clansmen, and we are not. But there are the arrows of the Suriut. Almost every shot that hits someone will bring them down. Very powerful indeed. I'm waiting for these people to start firing so that you can see their fire arrows in effect, but they're having a bit of a bad day at the moment. Where are the Daratai hunters? Bring them out of the AI control. Shoot back, you fools! Shoot back! Right, so let's have a look. The Daratai hunters, as I say, have fire arrows, but it is purely the fire arrow that is on fire. They don't actually set anyone on fire. But... falling in line there, as you can see, the arrows of the Loknarim do set people on fire, and that it is an incredibly useful boost. And with them firing at a normal rate, they can just drop units like there's no tomorrow. Alright, let's get the chariots around here. You can see the burning corpses of the fires of Rune. Smoke fills the air across the battlefield. But Enedwaith look a bit afraid to come at us really at the moment, don't they? Anyway, we've got the perfect target to test our arrows against over here. Catapults fired. Doom, doom, doom. And away they go. Alright, speed her up. We're only here to see a few of the features. As you will see as the fire arrows whistle into the enemy line, they are very powerful. And in go the cavalry, the chariots, charging through. Now, I suppose it's pertinent at this point to explain that chariots, as I say, and as many of you will know, are actually really easy to kill. They have a very large hitbox. They are very poor against any unit that gets a bonus against cavalry, and do just remember that. But the best way to use them is not to attack an enemy, but to charge through the enemy, because they are very good at running people over. As the scythe wheels cut through the men of Enedwaith. Unfortunately, though, do bear note that they also run through your own lines just as much. They're already feeling regret about what they've just done. They've turned around and stopped. So watch out for charging into your own men, because it can damage you as well. Oh, Enedwaith's War Chanters over there. We'll see those next week as well. So that concludes this faction overview. Version 2.1, which is what we swiftly released after version 2 to fix some bugs. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you an idea of what you can expect to play as Rune, and I hope you're looking forward to Enedwaith next week. I certainly am. I love Enedwaith. One of my favourite factions. But until we speak again, dear friends, Navar Naden Perimad Melunin, and farewell.